Hey there, friends. Welcome back to another cozy story time, a little pocket of calm in your day. This story is for everyone, no matter your age. So find a comfy spot, maybe a warm drink, and let's wander into a heartwarming tale together. It all began in the soft golden hours of late spring, in a tiny village called Maplewick, the kind of place where the air always smells faintly of lilacs. The rooftops are a patchwork of moss and terracotta, and every front garden seems to have its own sleepy cat. Our story follows Clara, a quiet, thoughtful girl of about 12. She had honey brown hair that curled gently at the ends, and a pair of well-worn boots she wore every day, no matter the weather. Clara lived in a charming stone cottage with her grandmother, a sweet woman everyone in the village called Granny May. The cottage was tucked behind a rose-covered gate, with a garden that seemed to stretch on forever, overflowing with marigolds, lavender, daisies, and sun-warmed vegetables. But Clara's favorite spot was beneath the old fig tree at the very back. That's where she spent her afternoons sketching, reading, or just watching clouds drift lazily across the sky. One soft afternoon, while weeding a row of carrots, Clara noticed something odd, glinting in the soil. She brushed it off gently. It was a small, brass key, old, delicate, and cool to the touch. "Granny!" she called, rushing inside, with the key still nestled in her palm. Granny May looked up from her knitting, her eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Now where'd you find that?" "In the garden," Clara said. "Under the fig tree." Granny took the key and held it thoughtfully. "Well now," she said softly, "I haven't seen this in years." Clara leaned in. "What is it for?" Granny smiled in that secret sort of way only grandmothers can. "It opens something very special. But first, you have to find what it belongs to." Clara's curiosity bloomed like the tulips by the window. That night, she placed the key beside her bed, watching it gleam under the moonlight as if it were waiting. Outside, the cottage slumbered under a velvet sky. Wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere deep within the old house, something ancient and gentle stirred a memory, perhaps, or a story just waiting to be found. And so, with spring thick in the air and adventure blooming all around, Clara's journey into the past and her family's most precious secret was just beginning. The next morning, Clara woke with the brass key still resting on her nightstand, catching the first light of dawn. She picked it up and turned it over in her hand. It felt heavier now, not in weight, but in meaning, like it knew it was part of something bigger. After breakfast warm porridge with honey and slices of baked apple, Clara and Granny May sat in the sunroom, the windows fogged slightly with the morning chill. Outside, the dew sparkled on the garden leaves, and a plump robin sang cheerily from the fence. "Granny," Clara asked, "what kind of treasure do you think the key unlocks?" Granny May smiled softly. "It's not gold or jewels, if that's what you're thinking," she said, "but it's something much more valuable." That only deepened Clara's curiosity. She spent the day searching every nook of the cottage. She checked old drawers, lifted loose floorboards, and even peeked behind dusty paintings. The key didn't fit anything. Until, just before dusk, she remembered the attic. The attic door was always closed, but never locked. It led to a narrow staircase, steep and creaky. Clara climbed up, flashlight in hand. The air grew cooler, filled with the scent of wood, old paper, and something floral and faint. At the very back of the attic, behind stacked trunks and covered furniture, Clara found a small wooden door with a brass keyhole, half hidden behind an embroidered curtain. Her heart fluttered. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the brass key, and slowly turned it in the lock. Click. The door swung open with a soft sigh. Inside was a tiny room barely big enough to stand in, with wooden shelves lining the walls. But it wasn't the room that made Clara gasp. It was what was on the shelves. There were notebooks, hundreds of them, all wrapped in ribbons. Beside them, worn photo albums, letters in delicate handwriting, and drawings carefully folded and tucked away. It was a treasure trove not of riches, but of memories. Clara sat down, picking up one of the albums. It was filled with photographs, black and white snapshots of a younger Granny May, smiling in fields of wildflowers, baking pies in the very same kitchen, holding hands with Clara's grandfather by the sea. Each picture told a story. Each letter held someone's voice. Clara read for hours, lit only by the soft orange glow of her flashlight. When she finally came back downstairs, the stars were out, and Granny May was waiting by the fire, a warm cup of cocoa in her hand. "I found it," Clara whispered, eyes wide. Granny smiled. "Then you found our family's true treasure." And Clara knew, even before the next page of the story unfolded, that what she'd discovered wasn't just her family's past, it was part of who she was. The next day dawned soft and golden, as if the sun itself was wrapped in a cozy blanket. Clara woke early, eager to return to the attic. The little hidden room now felt like her own secret library, a place where time slowed and stories whispered through the dust. Granny May gave her a knowing smile as she passed through the kitchen, a warm buttered scone in Clara's hand before she even asked. "Take your time," Granny said gently. "There's more in there than you might think." Back in the attic, Clara sat cross-legged on the old rug and carefully opened one of the faded notebooks. Inside, in careful cursive, were journal entries from her great-grandmother's stories of village dances, starlit picnics, planting the very fig tree where the key had been found. There were sketches of the garden as it had once been, with sunflowers taller than rooftops and a swing that had long since vanished. But what caught Clara most were the letters, dozens of them, bundled with ribbons and tied with care. They weren't written to anyone famous, just between family. Parents writing to children who'd moved away, siblings sharing dreams, cousins describing everyday joys like baking their first loaf of bread or seeing the northern lights for the first time. There was one letter from Granny May when she was about Clara's age. In it, she wrote about finding a lost baby bird and caring for it in a teacup until it could fly again. Clara smiled at the soft, looping handwriting and the words that seemed to shimmer with kindness. She felt like she was walking through her family's heart. As the afternoon sun poured through the attic window, Clara wrote a letter of her own. She folded it neatly and placed it in a new envelope, tucking it gently on an empty shelf. When she climbed down later, her cheeks were rosy, and her hands smelled faintly of lavender-scented paper. Granny May was sitting by the window, mending a quilt. "I think I understand now," Clara said quietly. Granny looked up, her needle pausing mid-stitch. "These memories," Clara continued, "they're the treasure, aren't they? All the stories and letters, they're like pieces of love saved in time." Granny nodded, her eyes soft. "That's right, dear. Things fade, but stories, they keep us alive, even long after we're gone." Outside, the wind rustled through the fig tree leaves. Clara watched the garden below, filled with bees in bloom, and felt a calm joy settle deep in her chest. She knew this was only the beginning. One day, she'd add more letters, more sketches, more stories, because now she was part of the treasure, too. The days that followed felt different, not louder or busier, but fuller, like a quiet song playing in the background of everything. Clara began to carry a little notebook wherever she went, just like the one she found in the attic. She wrote about the color of the sky after rain, the way Granny May hummed when she cooked, and how the garden always smelled like rosemary and warm earth after the sun dipped low. Each day, she added a little something to the secret room. A pressed leaf from the fig tree, a photo of her and Granny May, laughing as Flower dusted their noses during a pie-making afternoon, a tiny watercolor of the robin that watched from the fence post each morning. The attic, once silent and forgotten, now felt alive again, as if the house itself were quietly smiling. Granny May began joining Clara sometimes, flipping through the old albums and telling stories the photos stirred up. She'd point at faces and say, "That's your Uncle Teddy, always told the worst jokes," or, "That's me and your grandfather on our first spring picnic. He brought lemonade and forgot the cups." Clara loved those moments most. One misty evening, after a walk through the damp orchard where the scent of ripe apples mingled with wood smoke from nearby chimneys, Clara sat at her bedroom window and wrote a letter. "To the one who finds this one day," it began. She wrote about the treasure she found, not just in the attic, but in the quiet rhythms of her days, in the softness of Granny's voice, in the way the old house creaked like it was sighing in its sleep, in the wildflowers that nodded along the fence. When she placed the letter in the attic, she smiled. It didn't matter when or if someone found it. What mattered was that the story was there, waiting, just like all the others. And on a golden afternoon weeks later, Granny May handed Clara a small wrapped box tied with ribbon. Inside was a brass key. "This one opens the drawer in the study," she said with a wink. "I think it's time you knew what's in there too," Clara giggled. "Another treasure?" Granny shrugged playfully. "Maybe. Or maybe just the next page." The fire crackled that night. The stars blinked quietly above the garden. And somewhere, in a little room tucked behind a curtain, generations of memories rested together, safe and waiting. And that's the end of our story, dear friends. If you enjoyed walking through the quiet halls of this family's memories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone you love. Come back again soon for more cozy tales where the tea is always warm and the stories are always from the heart. Chi.